Hey everyone, welcome to our Next Level Summit panel on Next Level Leadership. I'm Alicia Menendez. I am an anchor on MSNBC, and I want to thank you all so much for joining us. In this session, we are going to hear from top-level newsroom leaders and managers from across the NBC Universal News Group. So whether you are getting ready to take the leap into news management or you are already there and trying to figure out how to land that next big promotion, these executives have been exactly where you are. I want to introduce you to them all now. Anzio Williams, Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at NBC-owned television stations. Catherine Finch is the Senior Vice President of Global News at NBC News and MSNBC. Janelle Rodriguez, Senior Vice President of Editorial at NBC News. And Lacey O'Toole, Managing Editor at CNBC. It goes without saying, we want this to be dynamic. So if you have questions for me, for our panelists, put them in the Q&A tabs. They are on the right side of your screen, and we're going to do our best to answer them live. Thank you all so much for being here. All right, friends, I'm going to do a really quick whip. 1 minute. Anzio, I'm going to start with you. Explain what it is you do at NBC.
So I work for the NBCU Local division. I work for the division that runs our own television stations. That includes NBC-owned television stations and Telemundo-owned television stations. I am the Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I am responsible for the culture of our places. I also have a content responsibility. How do we treat content? And I'm also responsible for championing the good people that we have in our organization. So that is a wide, broad view, but we make sure that we're taking the good people that we have, that we're elevating them, that we are supporting them, and that we're giving them the tools that they need to succeed.
Catherine, Anzio honored my 1 minute rule. Can you explain your job at NBC?
Yeah, I'll try to do that as well. I oversee the editorial operations for NBC News and MSNBC Digital. And that spans the gamut from, reporters, editors, to folks on social media, digital video producers, the folks who send you those push alerts or email alerts. It is a full service operation, and we are responsible for not only the stories that you see in social, but on our site and on our app.
Lacey.
Hello, great to see you all. I am the CNBC Business Day Managing Editor, so I'm primarily responsible for making sure we're well positioned every day for what we know and what we don't know. I also manage our breaking news team and our forward planning teams and work with reporters to develop stories, be it breaking news, evergreen stories, and then also with all of our dayside shows and the news with Shepard Smith to make sure that everyone is placed and we're covering what we need to be when we are, as well as all of our anchor scheduling and making sure that we have all the anchors and all the right exchanges at all the right times.
Janelle.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm Janelle Rodriguez. I oversee NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. I launched and oversee NBC News Now, which is our 24/7 streaming service. And I also oversee our breaking news specials team. So when you hear this is an NBC News special report, that's our team.
I am so impressed that everyone was able to take their big, complex jobs and boil it down to 1 minute. So thank you for that. Anzio, I want to start with you, but I want to ask you all the same question, which is, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about how we get people in the door, and that is a critical step of this process. But I also think, Anzio, that a lot of people feel like they get just sort of stuck in the middle. And so I wonder in your own career if there has been a moment where you felt stuck, where you felt it was hard to level up. And if you can take me back to that moment and then tell me what it was you did, what were the actionable steps you took to get yourself unstuck and to the next level?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I would say that, every couple of years you hit this mark. So don't, be anxious about it. Don't be nervous about it when you're trying to figure out, what's the next step in your career. I've always, I got some early advice from a mentor that whenever I got to that point where I was feeling anxious, I was feeling nervous about what I was going to do next, to work on myself. He encouraged me to look within to say, okay, have I done all the things that I need to do? Does my work speak for itself? Does my resume speak for itself when I'm looking? And make sure that that if I'm looking to take another step to better my career, make sure that I have gotten better myself, that I can look back on all the performance reviews that I had, and I worked on all those things, that I made the places where I worked at better. That, what did people say about me when I was not in the room? So I've really worked on that to say, okay, turn it inside and say, okay, if you can't sleep at night because you're wondering what's next for you, that's your body telling you, get up, do something for yourself.
I love that piece of feedback, Catherine. And I think you'll agree with me, Catherine, because you and I have talked about this in the past, is some of that work is self-reflection. Some of it is self-awareness. That is absolutely a critical piece of this. There can be no promotion without excellence, delivering excellence day to day. That's often not enough, right? In addition to having all of that self-awareness, in addition to delivering an excellent product day in, day out, you also have to be able to self-promote.
Yeah, I think so. And I always think of it as what do you want your learning curve to look like? And make sure you don't spend too much time in that kind of plateau. If you want your learning curve to look like this, as it starts to slow, it may be a year out. You're not ready to move, but it may be a year out. That's when you start to think about, how do I plant the seeds for that next thing I might want? And some of that is going out and starting to talk to people, whether it's, related to the group or the team that you're on, whether it's a different part of the business, but you have to start to plant these feelers and start these conversations. And, I think before you get that feeling of stuck, that's almost like once you're stuck, it's too late or it's really far in the process. So think about and plan ahead, start having conversations with a broader group. I always think or say to even myself, but certainly a lot of folks that I talk to, all you're doing is having a meeting and a conversation. There are no obligations there. You're not indicating, I want a job from you now. You just want to understand either how that team works or that business works or how that show works and what roles and opportunities might exist within that group. So a lot of it is that. And then similar to Anzio, I think another part of it is, while you're in that position that you currently inhabit, think of ways to continue to challenge yourself that fill within the remit of your team or your responsibilities. But that kind of growth while you're still in that position, I think helps also further diversify your experience, your skills, and what you might be able to apply to that next role.
Yeah, I love that idea of continuing to build and stretch in your current role, even as you look toward a bigger future role. I wonder for you, Janelle, was there a moment where you felt stuck, both just sort of going through the pipeline or in other people's perception of you?
I think to me, really the biggest leap that I was most anxious about was going from senior producer to executive producer. And as you rise up the ranks from, I started very junior and then made senior. And as you start applying for this executive producer and above jobs, the air gets thinner and thinner. It just gets way more competitive. You often have people who have experience as executive producers going for those jobs. You have your peers going for those jobs. And no one's just going to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, tag, you're it. Sometimes that happens if you happen to be on a show team where the EP leaves and the anchor and you have a really great rapport. That's one way a senior makes the next jump. But to what Catherine said about, to me, it was important to be able to articulate to people who had hiring ability, I want to be an executive producer. That's what I want to do. And so that they knew when the time came up, they approached me about it, right? But it was, to me, it felt like a very long time. It was really only 2 years probably that I was in this, I'm ready land. But the other thing I would say, and I see this a lot just amongst various teams and at all levels, right? Very senior folks, but also very junior, is sometimes people get distracted by, I'm ready for the next thing. And so they stop being really excellent at the job they're in. And so because they're like, well, I'm beyond that and everybody should know that, and therefore I should just get promoted. But inevitably what happens when you're up for one of those promotions, people, whether you know it or not, of course, are going to ask around. They're going to ask the people you currently work for, people who work under you, around you, how are they at the job? You want to be the all-star of your current job, the same way you brought that passion and fire in your first couple months to the job. If you're several years into it, you need to be that person while you're looking for the next thing, and not, like, well, I'm over it, I'm beyond it. You should just know that I'm awesome and promote me. And I think that trips up people a lot, is the, kind of getting a little too comfortable with their skills and assuming that that's in itself. People want to hire someone who's a rock star in their current job.
Right. You need to prove it in both results and in the way you articulate to others what it is you want. You need, and Lacey, I think that is a big part of it, right? No one can put you on the path you want to be on. No one's going to open doors for you unless you are really clear with people about not just what you want, but what it is you bring to the table. I wonder for you, the moment in your own career when you felt a little stuck and how you got unstuck.
I think so. I've had a little bit of a different career in that I have been at CNBC for 20 years. So I have moved within the organization. And there were many times when I was told, well, if you want that next job, I don't want to say that maybe you should go, but maybe get some experience and come back. And these were people that you just talked to in the industry who say, maybe you should go to that other station or that other network and get that experience or that next leadership step. And I chose to just stay within CNBC and work through the different positions here. And so I think when you're stuck is when perhaps that next position isn't available and you don't know when it will become available. And maybe that's when you change course and take a different tack than you thought you would. If you're on a show, perhaps that's when you move into the field, or if that's when you're on digital, you move into television. And you can sort of navigate that map within your own organization if you take that route. So I think when I felt stuck was when that next step wasn't available. And it was the question of how long would I be there, a step down. And to many of these points, I think it's just continuing to do that high level work and also finding ways to better yourself or learn skills you don't have, even if they're skills that are, a job position or title that may be 4 steps beneath where you are now. It may be something that you never learned or a different track, and go back and learn that, or start to do something, come up with another idea, create another franchise on your own. And all of that just adds to how you keep yourself engaged in the moment and also get the skills that will make your next position better.
Lacey, I love that you've been somewhere for 20 years because that absolutely makes you a unicorn. And it also brings me to this question we have from the audience. It's from Adam Salad, who says, I've been in the business now for 11 years, 8 as a producer, 3 as an MMJ. I would like to move into management. Would you suggest starting that in a smaller market first? NCO?
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, I was just reading that question myself. A couple of things, Adam. The title of this, presentation here today has leadership in it. And I think you want to exchange that word management and go into leadership. So you don't necessarily need a title to be a leader. So you're a leader right now, whether you're still in that producer role or you're in that MMJ role, you want to be a leader. You want to be known as a leader. And so I would say that the best thing for you, Adam, is to think about the skill sets that you have right now and how they are all transferable into that leadership position. So whether, let's say, for instance, you've been a producer and you've been an MMJ, you've been a reporter, hey, guess what? You're applying to someone's managing editor's job. You have read scripts. You've been on the other side. You've been able to write scripts. You've been able, what timing is like of a show. The pressures that a producer is under. And so sell yourself with the transferable skills, and don't necessarily look at market size today, because that's been thrown out the window with the recent just struggles to find great leaders and find people in our business that are doing great work. I used to have some standards. I was sitting up on this high horse, and I needed you to work 7 different places and do 15 different jobs. And now I need you to just have some leadership experience, have good character, and eager to learn. And we can make a superstar out of you.
Yeah, I mean, Catherine, I think this conversation used to happen very much in the context of market and market size. I think there's an added dimension now, which is it's linear, it's streaming, it is digital, and being willing to make those moves, right? Not being hyper committed to one form. It is where I have seen people have the quickest ascension and really, I think, be able to make a case for themselves as they move into leadership, that they have a real 360 understanding of the business. I wonder how you see that, Catherine.
Yeah, I think, it's funny. You're right. Once upon a time, it was, do I go to a small market to start out? And I think now it's sort of, I always say, like, the feeler should be broad and wide. And what you're always looking at is not just, obviously, like, sometimes the openings don't exist when you're really looking. So that's why they should be broad and wide. And if you have multiple things that you might be able to consider as real options, then you can start to play with, well, what do I really want in that next job? How much responsibility, how much independence, how much training, whatever it might be, begin to evaluate, like, what are the pros and cons, so to speak, of various positions. I think on the digital side, we're still very much, and many of you know this, there's so much freedom you have. There's a lot of independence. There's a lot of room for growth. And the business itself moves very quickly. There's always sort of disruption, in your world. And to some degree, I used to always say it's like building, a house on quicksand in an earthquake-prone neighborhood where tornadoes come in now, three quarters of the year. Like, there's just a lot of change and constant movement in your industry. And you never know who's going to disrupt. Is it Google? Is it technology? Is it a social platform? But you kind of want to, you do need to think about, like, what type of experience do I really want at core? And that could happen in a big market, small market, established place, startup. And that's why I think you've got to kind of look out, broadly, and then think about, well, what's going to give me the richest experience? And what do I have a real shot at?
Right. And Jenna, I think even once you've decided that for yourself, there's then the next step of getting in the room with a recruiter or an interviewer, where you need to be able to explain how the skills you have in one transpose into another. I mean, as someone who has yourself done that, how do you communicate that to someone? Because very often we get in these rooms, people are like, well, you've only worked in digital, or, well, you've only worked in local, or, well, you've only worked in cable. I feel like we all have a version of that we have heard. And then you need to be able to make the case for why your skills actually make you a strong candidate. What does that sound like?
I mean, when we're talking about senior and leadership roles, I definitely am looking for people who are able, especially if you're trying to transfer, right? You're not coming up the ranks in some natural progression, but you're trying to move from one area to the other. Having really specific ideas, really knowing the platform or the area that you're, trying to get a job in, not just coming in and saying, and I've had multiple conversations like this, look, I have XY experience, I really want a leadership job on your team. And it's like, okay, doing what? And what are you going to do on the team? And what are you going to bring to the team? So really understanding the group that you're going for, coming to the table with ideas, coming to the table with, like, a real articulation of, this is my hard skill set. I'm just picking a couple of things that Angio mentioned. Like, I'm an incredible script doctor. I really understand how to mentor young reporters and develop narrative and storytelling and journalism. Or I have a strong technical background. I can lead a team of people using new technology and editing and be able to grow them. Or I'm an incredible control room person, and so I can lead a team and grow a team. Or I've done 4 different shows and I have a track record of launching shows and developing unique ideas. And these are the 4 areas I think I could do for you. The more tangible you are, especially the bigger the leap it is, be specific. While I have a lot of experience and you should hire me because I want to do something new, rarely lands.
Right. I think that's exactly right. And Alicia, it sort of speaks to this question, but I would like you to tackle this one. It's from Lauren Hensley, who says, Any quick tips on how to make your managerial resume shine? Should I make result-driven bullet points, right? So there's the conversation you have in the room. Very often there's the CV you put together that's supposed to express this for you. What actually pops?
I think that's right. And result-driven bullet points, I think, are helpful. And then they start the conversation. That's where you can come in and say, you did this, explain it to me. What were some of the challenges you faced? What did you know going into it? Did you have any examples? Where did you come up with these ideas? So that gives a good bouncing off point, and it's a way to differentiate yourself from others who may come in with their experience, and then the conversation starts with, okay, what did you learn and how did you transform things and how can you do that here? So you sort of come in halfway through the alphabet, and that's a great place to start the conversation.
There is a question coming in from Rebecca Stefanski. Anyone who wants to take this can take this, and it's extraordinarily timely, which is, as a manager, how can we prevent burnout and improve morale? I feel as though that has never been more relevant than it is right now. Who wants to take that one? Catherine, you talk to me about morale.
Yeah, okay. It is extremely relevant. It's really tricky. I think, we're all moving very fast, especially with this ongoing coverage of the war in Ukraine. It's, burnout and morale suffer as well, because there's a sort of a mental health aspect to this as well. I am a big believer in one-on-ones, regular check-ins, and I think everyone should do it. A lot of folks over the years have said, but I talk to so-and-so every day, many times throughout the day. I think there has to be a point during your week or every 2 weeks or every month where you are just having a conversation with your team members and or your directs. So I think that's one thing, and you can catch a lot during that. And then regular check-ins in general, I think are important, even if they happen during an editorial meeting that's hybrid, some virtual, some in person. Being able to call on someone or ask someone a little bit more about what they're up to that day, or more details on the story they may be covering, who's virtual especially. I think those things are important to do, and certainly to always be aware of thanking teams for their work and their effort. I think that goes a long way. In terms of burnout, I think it's really important to both model and stress to the team that you got to be able to step away and take breaks. All of us know that we could wake up at 4 a.m. and work until 1 a.m. if we really wanted to. There's always plenty of work to be done, and it never ends. But that isn't, to me, that isn't the model that we want to, that's not what we want to do in model after. What we really want to do is try to think of how do we work smarter? How do we let go of things that might not be as useful to the business or to the show, and constantly think about, like, with the resources we have and the time we have, how do we optimize everything we can do? And that sounds corny, but it has to be that way. I think if we're not healthy in every way we can be and energized, we're just not going to be thinking about not just the best reporting we can put out every day, but how do we innovate? How do we lead? How do we get ahead of our competition? So I think it's tricky and hard, but I encourage managers to constantly look out for it. And if we don't cover a story that day because someone's out, then we don't cover that story. It doesn't happen, but I think that's what we have to message that, because I think we're all workaholics and everyone wants to be doing their best work. And we're certainly a very competitive news org.
And I would say too, to add to that, Rebecca, I think that as a leader, not as a manager, as a leader, you can practice MBWA, managing by walking around, and nothing can replace having that touch, keeping your ear low to the ground and what's happening in your organization, being out with the people. And because the people, they know what's happening, and then they're going to help support others. And also, if you're there and your presence is important. Your presence, you're going to hear it, you'll know it, you'll see it, and folks will feel comfortable with talking to you about themselves and also looking out for their coworkers.
Part of what has made these remote days so especially challenging. Lacey?
I just want to jump in with, I read a stat this morning that sort of it was amazing to see that Microsoft put out a study and said that the average person has 250% more meetings now than they did pre-pandemic. And that's because we've scheduled so much to make sure that we have teams and cohesiveness and that we're checking in, and all of that I think is so amazing. But another part of that I started doing, and I spoke to Yvette Miley, who's here today, and she said she encourages it too. Block time on your calendar, even during the day, for you, so that you can reflect and you can do your work and you can catch up on things. But if you're constantly booked with meetings, that sense of burnout and never sort of getting over the mountain or achieving that goal, it just doesn't happen if you're constantly in that meeting. So block time for yourself, encourage people on your team to do that so that you can sort of catch up and have a little bit of that humanness in this screen world we live in.
I always get nervous before we do panels like this because this isn't all just hard skills, right? There's an element of finesse when you are talking about leadership. There is an element of finesse when you are talking about career ascension and advancement. There is a question here that made me think of it from NBC's Anna Schechter, where she asks, how do you get others to see you in a new light, one of leadership, when you have been in a specific role for many years, right? That sort of that thing that often gets people to the middle, which is you're a person who puts your head down, you work really hard, you get it done, you deliver, but then you are seen as a steak with no sizzle, or you're seen as a workhorse instead of a show pony, and you even come to sort of resent all of the show ponies, when in truth, you gotta be able to do a little bit of both. If you have been in the same role for a long time, people are like, that person, great team member, just not sure she has what it takes. How do you do the showing instead of the telling?
I mean, that's a tough one. And it certainly happens to a lot of folks who, exactly as you described, work really hard, always come through. They're always there when they're called upon. They make the tough sacrifices. They're not the first ones to say, hey, look at me, or be braggadocious. And so everybody loves working with them. But then they get they're very solid, but I'm not sure if they're ready to lead kind of vibe attached to them. A couple of things. One is, trying to articulate to either your managers or their peers that give you another assignment, right? Even if it's just a temporary assignment, give you an opportunity to take on something that reflects your leadership skills in a different light. That's one scenario. And unfortunately, a different option is to leave and go join another team or another organization. And I hate to say it, but sometimes, and I think that's a responsibility as well of leadership, is to spot those people like that who are just really hard workers and just always come through, but maybe, for whatever reason, either they're not super, they're very humble, or, they're just have kept their head down all these years. You as a leader are responsible to find those people and make sure you're promoting and you're reaching out to them before they feel like, I've hit this wall, nobody will see me in a different way, I've got to go somewhere else. But I think you either have to create an opportunity that is different than your day-to-day, because, for some folks, they are already perceived as excellent, but for whatever reason, it's not getting them to the next level. So either find a different assignment, even if it's temporary, or you may have to look around. Or for some people, they, aren't aspiring to do 500 other things. They love what they do and they're masters of their craft. I mean, you could think of photographers, editors, producers, writers. We do a lot of work that is craft work. And I would also say not everybody needs to aspire to keep going up, up, and up. Some people love the craft of what they do. And that kind of craft work does, can take a lifetime of refinement and improvement and can be challenging. So I also don't know that everybody has to feel like they need to change jobs or get promoted every 2 years. If you love what you do, you certainly want your experience. If you are, someone who wants to focus on craft, you want your salary to reflect your experience over time. But I also wouldn't feel the pressure that you have to necessarily leave to be growing.
You said a lot of really important things in there, Janelle, and I want to tease two of them out. One is this idea that It's not just the employee that needs to be thinking about this. If you want to be an excellent manager, if you want to be an excellent leader, you need to think about how you give people those opportunities, how you reward someone who is a workhorse. And then also this idea that people don't just step into leadership. People become leaders because they are given opportunities to lead. And that doesn't necessarily mean just a title. It can mean being put on a stretch assignment, being asked to run a meeting a day that someone isn't out. And over a period of time, those little opportunities begin to reposition someone as someone who is seen as having potential and possibility. In my mind, it very much connects to this idea of sponsorship. And just for those who don't know, I think we've spoken a lot as careerists about the idea of mentorship. A mentor is incredible. They can give you great counsel, great advice. I think a lot of us, I'm a mortgage millennial, thought that like the right mentor was just going to be like the Wizard of Oz, who would pull back a curtain and reveal your entire career. And that is not how mentorship works either. But a sponsor is a person who really delivers for you, who has a lot of connections, is willing to use them and leverage them in service of you and the advancement of your career. Have any of you either had sponsors or been sponsors to someone in a way that you think there's something to learn from the experience that you have had about either how you find that person, how you persuade that person to become your sponsor, or what it looks like to actually deliver for someone else once you're in that position, right? Like people, advice is great. Advice is not what propels a career. Opportunity is what propels a career. Any thoughts? Angie, I see you. You're getting ready to give me an answer.
You brought up you brought up the mentor and the sponsorship, and then I'm gonna take it to the next level. I think you're looking for someone to champion for you. You want them to, I mentioned champion earlier in the presentation here. Champion, the difference that sets the part between the mentorship, sponsorship, and the champion. Champion is when you are willing to co-sign for someone. I don't know about you guys, but I got a family member that asked me to co-sign on an apartment, co-sign on a car loan, co-signing is you're putting your name on the line for that person. And that's what you want to be able to do, is put your name on the line. You want someone to be able to say, hey, I guarantee you this young lady right here will make you look better, will meet all expectations. And so I think there is a difference there. And as you're looking for someone, if I give you some advice today, you can call me a mentor. I'm okay with that, and then all of a sudden, if I say your name in a room, if I just kind of throw like, hey, check out this person, right here. I know a person. I got a guy. I got a young lady, then that means you're signing them up for it. And when someone does that, now you have their name on your back. You have to deliver. You have to see it through because they've co-signed for you. You can't mess up that person's credit. And then I just want to, just pause for 1 second, because I have to say this, because as I'm sitting here looking at these 4 ladies on the screen with me, guys, I've been trying not to get emotional, but this is what NBC looks like, all day long. I know some of your companies are not like this. This is how our company looks around. You look 360 degrees, top to bottom. There are strong ladies, leading in a big way. And so I was sitting here, I was trying not to cry. I just took a picture because I was just so excited. But this is what we consider meeting the moment. And I remember, 25, 30 years ago, it would just be me and a bunch of other guys, and they wouldn't look like me. So I'm thankful for you, ladies. I just need to say it. I'm sorry. Sorry, everyone, for taking up the time.
No, I'm so glad you said that. And it's important because it creates psychological safety when you're not the first, the only different in every room that you're in. And when you feel like you're not just speaking for yourself, but an entire community. Catherine, you and I have talked about this a million times, the sort of added stress levels that brings in for all of us to actually be in a community of peers, of leadership who have that shared experience. There are a few questions here that are speaking to that. So I want to start teasing them in. And I'm going to give preference to Ayana, who is one of my producers. Ayana, I'm so glad that you are here today. And I love this question, which is, Catherine, tips for learning skills outside of your current role in order to elevate yourself. Right? When we talk about growing and stretching, how do you take that upon yourself?
Yeah, it's so interesting because when you're asking, have I how to sponsor, if I sponsored folks. And I feel like people who come to me are only looking for, to some degree, a short-term, I'm burnt out, I need a new gig, how can you help me, what exists in your world, that kind of thing. And that I think is too late, right? And generally speaking, so just tips. So if someone were interested in trying to understand how the world of primetime news magazine producing happens, like that's where I say start to reach out to the Dateline team or the long form team. Or if you want to understand how we're producing for social video, start to engage with the teams that do it. I think for those coming up sort of early career, there's, I think, an incredible amount of generosity among peer set, especially in digital. I mean, people are constantly helping each other out in a way that I think is different perhaps than when I was coming up the ranks. So I think there's a lot of generosity there, but look for it and ask for it. And you might be surprised at how many people help give you, pull back the curtain and give you a sense of how this works, lets you sit in on meetings. We've done this throughout my time at Digital, inviting people in to kind of incubate on a team and get a sense of, or shadow a particular person, just to get a sense of how we operate. And I think that spirit of teaching exists throughout NBCUniversal and certainly exists in the news group. So I would say, like, tips, I would generally first go to people within your organization or your company and see what you can get from your peer set and above. But I think sometimes the ask is, it seems like, oh, well, nobody does that. I can't just ask for time. Everyone's busy. You'd be surprised how very few people actually ask for time. So that's where I would start.
Catherine, you're going to now get 20 requests for your time, so I hope you are prepared for what you have brought on yourself. There's a question, Janelle, that came in for you or for Anzio, but I'm going to throw it to you. And it's from Dawn Ennis, who is a transgender woman reporter, and said, your newsrooms simply don't have leaders like me, which I think makes covering the community harder. Your advice for climbing up a rung of the ladder?
Listen, I think it's always hard when what you mentioned, Alicia, you're the first one, you're the only one. And so there's no doubt about that. It takes extra energy, extra effort, extra mental stress to be able to constantly navigate being the only person in the room. I certainly, over my career, have seen many more transgender folks who are part of our teams who are both in mid-level and a couple more senior positions. So it's starting to happen. But I guess my best advice to you, Dawn, is, as with anybody else, be the best, right, in the role that you're in. Search for allies, right? So while there may not be a ton of people like you who share your experience specifically, there are certainly a lot of allies out there in the newsroom. And so finding your allies, both as a just peer support, senior level support, just friends support system, that's going to help you, right, deal with the just toll of navigating, right, all the other pressures that come on top of just doing the job. And then, to the sponsorship question, that Anzio posed, you want those people who are going to be the ones who say, yes, Dawn's the one, period. Not because you're transgender, not because you're a woman or tall or short or right, any of those other things, but because you're the best damn person for the job. So I would suggest all of those things, finding your network, finding your allies, and getting your sponsors.
Yeah, finding people who are willing to say your name in a room full of opportunities, it really is one of the best ways to propel your career. There's a question that's popped up a few times, so forgive me because I'm not going to credit it to anyone specifically, but I realize I've been pushing this through a very type A, careerist, ambitious lens, which is my personal lens. But there is a question about, Lacey, how you assess opportunities as they relate to your life and balance in your own life and other things that might be important for you. Is there ever a time where you say, this is a good opportunity, but not for me, not right now?
I think that happens, and you have to be in a good headspace to acknowledge that, because I do think that if you are very driven, you are always looking for the next job and always challenging yourself. But there are also times when it is okay to focus on the job you're doing and to find ways to do that job a little bit better instead of taking another opportunity that might stretch you in a way that you're not ready to be stretched personally. And we all have to acknowledge that. And I think it makes you better at your job, because no one wants someone to take that stretch if all it's going to do is make you stressed out, and then you're not going to be able to excel. So I think taking a beat and acknowledging where you are in your life and whether or not that move makes sense is important. And it's not something that's easy to do. And it's very hard, I think, especially for this day and age where it's always, the next title and how fast can I run? I want to run this marathon the fastest. I want to get to that job the fastest. This is exactly what I want to do. Taking a step back and realizing I can still get there or get there in a different way, but right now I need to focus on this, and it may not be that next step.
Anzio, I was delinquent and I forgot my laptop, which I was broadcasting on. So I had everybody scrambling 40 minutes ago. So to the team, I apologize for that. But I think I saw a child on your lap earlier. Did you have a kid in the shot?
Yes, I did have an 18-month-old in the shot. Yeah, absolutely.
So you've thought through this question.
Listen, I have always considered myself to be the worst to ask about life-work balance. I am a 50-year-old with a 18-month-old, and so I worked hard. All of my career, I was taught growing up to work 2 and 3 times harder than everybody else, and I just didn't take time for family, and so there was a great thing for me coming out of COVID to going into COVID. I got married the last 2 years, had a baby, got a new job, moved, relocated, so I kind of did it all. And anytime I'm talking to, folks that work in our division, I'm always able to say, make sure you prioritize. And then, and my grandmother put it this way. She talked about my dash. She said, what does your dash go say about you? And I was like, what are you talking about your dash? She said, that dash is, between the date you were born and the date you die. And they're not going to say you were a great producer, you were a great news director, you were a great, executive for NBC. No, they, you want them to talk about your legacy and the family. You were a good husband and you were a good, good father. And so that put it in perspective, for me. But it also, I think, it's made me a better person with the employees. And because, I certainly had to, I hated it when someone female come in and say, you're not going to like this, but I got to tell you this, and you're not going to want to hear it. I'm like, what? And they say, I'm pregnant. I'm like, what? Oh my gosh. This is the greatest thing. And so I wanted, along the way, I wanted folks to know that we support families. We believe that you are better off for having family members and doesn't take away from you.
As someone who has sat managers down and had that conversation, I am so glad that other people had you on the other side of that conversation, Anzio. And you set us off crying, so I'm glad you started. Now I have cried. If anybody else would like to jump in and shed some final tears on this segment. Catherine, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say and ask for what you want. Don't, if you've got childcare issues or you want to log off at 4 to try to get home for something and you're already working, many nights, just ask for what you want. I think that, that would be my regret as, especially when I was a young mom, that I just didn't ask for what I needed and just kind of allowed the work to kind of dictate. I always actually love when people say, hey, I've got this thing going on. Do you mind and we can accommodate? Sometimes we can't because we might have a big story or there may be a need for everyone to be all on a major breaking story. But I think that the spirit of trying to allow people to have balance, certainly after 2+ years of COVID, is greater than ever. And there, we all experience what we've actually gained by being remote for the first time ever for some of us and seeing our family in a way that we've never seen them. So I think that, let's take the lessons we've learned over the last 2 years and see how much more we can apply to how we work in a healthy way and still get the work done and be successful.
I think we're at that point, unfortunately. I could sit here and have this conversation all day where we need final thoughts. So Lacey, I'm going to start with you.
I would just say, giving a tip is, as a manager, one of the things that I did that I found really has helped me in my career is we talked about mentorship and sponsorship, but I think there's also developing your own, and I call it my board of directors, but people who I can turn to for advice on any topic, and people who I can show that sort of that fear to sometimes. I don't know how to handle this and I'm working through a decision. Having a board of directors with people at all different levels and all different backgrounds has really helped me. And I would encourage everyone to develop that over time. Just sort of collect the people and add them in the bag, and you never know when you're going to need which one, but they're great to have on hand.
I love your Mary Poppins bag full of people. Anzio?
I just wrap up by answering Christopher's question here about the position you didn't get, and I'll just say that what may seem like a setback in the moment, you have to actually look at it as a setup for the next best thing, and so always look at it like you didn't get it for a reason, and then something better is coming down the line. So that's how you treat those setbacks.
I just, on the back of that, I would say, optimism is something that everybody wants on their team. And so if you don't feel like you're moving fast enough, or you are disappointed by something you didn't get, continue to be that optimistic newsroom leader, because as soon as you get cynical and now you're gossiping and you're that person in the newsroom, that is gonna in itself will prevent you from moving to the next level. If you can stay focused and you stay optimistic and you just keep doubling down on what you do and what you're great at, it will come, right? And sometimes it doesn't always move as fast as we want it to move, and we've all been there. But don't get dispirited, don't get down. Just keep doing what you're doing and stay positive and optimistic.
Yeah, I would say similar to Janelle, like, show your talent, perform well. And then I think we didn't really touch on it directly, but since we're talking about leadership, think about your character and your integrity. And I think those things go a long way. So, talent and performance aren't everything. Also how you lead, how you interact with your peers, those under you, and your bosses and managers, all of that matters.
Yeah, it's really, I think it is what gives someone staying power. And I want to say one thing, nobody asked me my opinion, but Lacey, I love your board of directors. And I think sometimes what people get wrong is they imagine you need like a formal sitting room with your board of directors when it can be a text thread. It can be a WhatsApp chat. Like, it can be very informal, the touch points you have with these folks where you do check-ins with them, say, does this sound right? Does this sound like a good opportunity? Is this something I can pass up on? But having those people available and at the ready, it is just everything. Thank you all so much for your expertise. Lacey, Janelle, Catherine, Anzio, this was so fun. I hope we get to do it in person one day soon. We loved hearing about each of your personal journeys. And thank you all for watching, for asking all of these great questions. You made my job so easy. I hope you enjoyed this session. But coming up, 1 p.m. Eastern, back on the main stage, our must-see fireside chat with the chairman of the NBC Universal News Group, Cesar Conde. You can get there by clicking the Stages button that is on the left side of your screen, and that is just minutes away.